Hello!
Hello AOS fans!
It's the Agent of Weird Hollow.
And in this video we're going to give you 5 reasons to play the Paths of Prophecy deck. Ooh. So Pete, brand new Rivals deck.
Yeah, one that wasn't even announced.
No, it wasn't announced. A complete surprise when it came out on Warhammer Communities. It was a thing. We already knew, so it wasn't a complete surprise to us. It was very exciting. So a big thank you to GW for sending it to us. I love it. I think it's a brilliant deck.
Yeah, it's all about objectives.
And it's not broken.
No, it's quite well balanced.
Makes you think. It's got a few little design quirks in there which I really like, and it brings back some old warbands, I think.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in a separate video. 5 warbands to play with the Paths of Prophecy deck. So, but in this video, we're going to give you 5 reasons to play it, and I think almost did number 1 there by default.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, number 1 is that it brings back objective play.
It does. In a big way, objective play is here to stay. 11 of the 12 objectives are objective-based.
They are, yeah. They mention the word objective. It gets a bit confusing.
It does.
Because you objectives with objectives, they back to one of those historical problems of the game. But yeah, it's really nice. And they're holding different numbered objectives, holding combination of numbers of objectives, holding objectives of your opponent's half, holding objectives when you're injured.
Yep. And a lot of them, like you say, a lot of them are a bit clever. It's not just jump on it, score straight away. You've got to wait till your opponent's activation's gone past. So they've got some chance, but as long as you're canny, you can probably still guarantee the scores.
That actually, Pete, was reason number 2.
Number 2!
It opens up this interesting design space, which they haven't really utilised. I think there's a couple of cards in the latest season that has it, but they haven't really utilised it. I think there's some in Skavix as well.
Skavix and Spell,
which is this window of after an opponent's activation. You score stuff after an opponent's activation. And it's sort of interesting. When I was playing you, there were a couple of times where I was trying to set things up, but you were going first. So I got into turn 4 and I was ready to do whatever it was. It was like, well, I could do it, but you haven't got an activation, so I won't score it till next turn. Anything could happen by then. I'm
sure there were a few early cards that were after an opponent's activation, but there weren't many. And then when Grimwatch came around, it was just like move, score glory, which was just, it made it too easy.
Well, they pushed it the other way, didn't they? Because objective play was really hard. Nearly all of them were scoring the end phase, and it was really difficult because basically your opponent just held distraction till the end, waiting, and just pushed you off, and that was like, oh, there's supremacy gone again. Then they brought in cards like Temporary Victory, which were 2 glory, immediately scored, and you could basically push things off in a power step and then not do anything and score it.
Yeah, it was horrific.
So they've swung back. So after your opponents, it's interesting for a number of reasons. A, it's quite telegraphed what you're trying to do, and your opponent's got a chance to stop it. And then B, also some of the things, like I think there's one where you have to have taken a fighter out of action, where you've got to do that and then get on it, and you might have run out of activations by the end, because it's if your opponent goes first, you've actually only got 3 to squeeze it in. Number 3,
a lot of the cards, there's upgrades, there's ploys that enable you to change the value of the objective you're on. You might be able to add 1 or subtract 1, or make it 0 or make it 6. 6? Yeah. Even in a 2-player game, although it doesn't really tell you what happens in a multiplayer game. I'm going to turn this objective 9 into objective 6.
Well, I guess you wouldn't have to use it in that case, because you can basically, there is an objective for holdings. If you hold objectives 4, 5, and 6, you score it. So you could actually hold that objective.
You could actually do it without even
trying. I guess you might want to use it for an objective 9, because it would turn it into objective 6. But I think it also has a multiple. So I think 9 would probably put you over the edge.
Yeah, probably would, yeah.
It's a big score, 15 or something.
And that gives you a nice little meta game within the main game itself, that you've got to try and work out who you want to get where, depending on where the objectives are. You are a little bit at the mercy of where those objectives land, but obviously you can still be clever and try and favour your side with when you're placing them at the very start.
You are kind of back to that time of the game where if your opponent ends up with 3 objectives, or even just 2 objectives, but they're objectives 4 or 5, it can make some of the objectives in the deck a little bit harder to score. It's a bit of an uphill struggle, but there is a card for swapping them over. It's an action, but there is a card for swapping them over, and like I say, you can manipulate them with a number of cards, which is really interesting. And there's even a card to give a beast, and turn them into, actually they can hold an objective, but the objective value is 0. So it doesn't actually help you in some ways, but it does in others, because there's quite a few for just being on 2 objectives or holding all the objectives and things like that. So there's all sorts of shenanigans going on in this deck, which I really like.
Number 4
is that it's good with some of the older warbands. Now, I think Void Curse deck could be good with some of the older warbands, but most of all the other decks, pretty much because of the overpoweredness or strength of some of the later warbands, anything offensive is generally better with new warbands.
Yeah.
This deck is better with older warbands because they've got a bit more action economy, I think, or they've got less to them. Like Grimwatch, this deck is really good with the Grimwatch because Grimwatch's got lots of push cards. The Gits. It's good with them. We are going to do a video about five, so I won't spoil them all. But yeah, basically your older warbands can utilise some of the bits and pieces in this deck. I imagine the newer warbands can too, but I think because it's not so aggro based, the differential is smaller, so it just feels like, well, actually I could actually play a reasonable fist with this with it's got to be a reasonable number of model fighters. You probably want 5 or more.
Yes.
Because you don't want to be trying to play this with Stormcast.
But I've got a whole 4 objectives.
But certainly Grimwatch are back.
But number 5,
it's really nice to have a reason to play a lethal hex again.
A lethal hex?
I pretty much on the board front, I say it's nice because I get fed up picking boards, but I pretty much on the board front had like 2 or 3 that I would pick because they didn't have any lethal hexes. I don't like lethal hexes because they seem to me very hard to actually use in your favour, because you generally end up sitting up with them behind you and you get pushed into them, which is a bad thing. But there is a card in here which you score if you're wounded, after an opponent's activation, but if you're on wounded and still on an objective. So if you've got a chaff fighter in your own backfield and you put a lethal hex down there, you can run them through them onto the objective. The opponent almost certainly can't push them off, and then you surge score it. It's only 1.
It's like calculated risk.
It's like a slightly uphill calculated risk, but
it's called Held in a Bloody Fist.
It is, which is good.
Held in a Bloody Fist, calculated risk. There you go.
Brilliant. One small thing, it's not really a reason to play, in fact it's a reason not to play for number 6, is that I don't think this is that strong as a Rivals deck. On its own. It's really good in Nemesis and it can play really well with a number of different card opportunities, but it hasn't got that much push tech in it. It's got some really good sneaky cards for like I say, for swapping objectives or getting an extra move. But I think unless you're playing a warband that has a lot of its own push shenanigans, so maybe the Sepulchral Guard, it isn't all that good on its own. It needs a bit of supplement with, and we'll talk about that in the warband video, but it needs a bit of supplement with some warbands that have some good push tech.
I think also some of the objectives actively work against some other of the objectives, because some are about holding lower numbers of objectives and some are about holding higher numbers, and you can't score them both at the same time. And if you pick them both up and hand together,
that's a very good point. Some of them are score totaling exactly X. So you literally can't do, like you say, you literally can't do both of them because you can't.
Well, it'd be very hard because if you've got to score a certain amount, you've got to hold a certain amount, and you've got to hold like 2 objectives or something like that. You know you've got to go. Your options are much reduced, so you probably want to take the 6 that best suit you.
Exactly. Yeah, that is definitely the case. There's one that's worth 2 glory, I think, which you've got to hold 2 and 5 and have a fighter out of action that turn. And that means you can't score any of the other. You can't hold any of the others.
Nothing at all.
Just 2 and 5. That's it. And so you might be on 1 and 3. It's like, oh, well, I'm now on 2 and 5. Now I've got to get off 1 and the turn's over. And so that can be tricky. So yeah, that's a very good point.
So there you go. There are 5 reasons why to play the Paths of Prophecy.
Yeah, and I definitely say that number 1 is the main one. It's objective play in a not broken fashion.
Yeah, and actually this time around you've been playing it all through our games rather than me. Normally I'm the objective player. So
yeah, so it's I've been enjoying it, and I've always liked objective play, but I think you've tended to like the objective based warbands.
I think it's just because I've gone for the swarmy warbands, and quite often they go for holding objectives instead.
Do look out for other videos. We've got some Skavic stuff, and we've got some a video about which warbands you should play with the Paths of Prophecy. And if you have enjoyed this content, then please do consider supporting us on Patreon. You'll find a link in the description below.
And also don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that bell, and leave a comment below about what your 5 reasons are or what you're looking forward to doing with the Paths of Prophecy. So we'll see you soon.